and welcome to the Wellness with Juanita podcast. I'm your host, Juanita Nagai, an American living in Japan for 20 years. I've gone through some massive life changes and crises in my 20 years here. At its bleakest, I felt very isolated, alone, and helpless in the face of what was happening. I relied on alcohol and cigarettes to get through it the best I knew how, which worked until it didn't, and everything fell apart. I made it through with a little help from my friends, a fledgling mindfulness practice, and learning how to become my own strongest ally. I quit drinking and smoking, worked my way through my grief, found ways to forgive, created new connections, and started a regular exercise, meditation, and self-care routine. I've also become a national board certified health and wellness coach along the way, and developed a desire and passion to help others on their own personal journeys. This podcast is all about change, growth, healing yourself, learning how to get back up after life kicks you down, and exploring mindfulness and self-compassion as incredible tools available to each and every one of us to do just that. Hello, and welcome to the Wellness with Juanita podcast. I'm your host, Juanita Nagai. Today's episode is being recorded at the midpoint of the year. So it's the beginning of July. Half of 2026 has completed and half of it is left to go. So this is a really wonderful opportunity for self-reflection, checking back in with our intentions or goals, or maybe even New Year's resolutions that we created for ourselves on or around January 1st. Check in and see how that's going with a lot of kindness and compassion. A lot of us fizzle out at various rates throughout the new year as it starts. But, it's a really great opportunity to kind of check in with yourself and check in where you are, how things feel, how you feel like your year is going. And if you have anything to compare it to look at that original intention or goal. So that is what I try to do for myself at the midpoint of the year. I had the opportunity to reflect and go back and check in with my intentions. This year, I didn't really set these hard, fast, concrete goals. I kind of just tapped into what my intentions or thoughts or even kind of vibes were in January. And it was interesting. It was a very good practice. So the one word I chose for myself this year was trust. I feel like that guides me through my everyday, and I am fascinated, honestly, to see how it unfolds throughout the year and throughout every day. Things are already very different from what they were in the beginning of the year, and things are also very different from what I might have expected or conceived or imagined. I'm really trusting in the universe and in the process of my life and my practice and my career unfolding as it will. So trust still feels like it's what I need for this year. And then there were 3 kind of intentions, and it was interesting to go back and look at them because I thought I was remembering them. I thought I had them in mind, but I realized I had kind of misremembered or even forgotten the last one, which may or may not be the most important one. But so those 3 intentions were to slow down, to connect to joy, and to love this one right here. And so another way that I have also been thinking about that is presence, gratitude, and compassion. And these are the overarching intentions for myself for this year. So I personally went through that process of checking in with where I was at the beginning of the year, where I am now. I can sense into and really feel a kind of next phase or next chapter of the year beginning for myself. I also ended up rereading my journal from last year, so a full year ago, last summer, and that was also very interesting to see where I was and what phase of the path I was on a year ago. I think I did intentionally bring out my old diary because I was curious to see where was I exactly 1 year ago today. And then that kind of sent me down a whole rabbit hole of myself and my journey, which is always entertaining. But what I really want to talk about today is the idea of listening in general. I think most of us think of listening as something that we either do for others. So it's a generous act. Deep or active listening is one of the most precious gifts that we can give another person. So we think of listening as something that we either do for others or that we hope or wish that others do for us. We think of it in a reciprocal way. And that's fair. That is, you need something to hear in order to listen to it. But I also believe that listening to ourselves is equally, if not more so, important in life. And I was really inspired by this little daily calendar for my birthday this year. And the other day, I will share this for the YouTube viewers. The other day, the little line was, compassionate listening brings about healing. And it really struck me because not only can compassionate listening in a counseling or therapeutic sense certainly bring about healing. I think that is what we think of when we think of counseling or we think of therapy. When we are afflicted by difficulties or challenges, either in our current lives or in the past, we go to therapy. We seek out professional help because we want to heal. We want to feel better. So there is that very standard, I guess, understanding of this idea that, yes, when we are heard and feel understood, that can bring about a lot of healing, that can bring about a lot of relief to our suffering. Again, though, I think that compassionate listening to ourselves really brings about healing as well. And it's something that I don't think that we're necessarily taught how to do. It's something that I don't think is particularly valued or emphasized in our modern day world. I think that being in the wellness space is a very conflicted thing for me for lots of different reasons. But this quote helped to remind me that that is why I am doing what I am trying to do. And that is what has been so valuable for me personally, is learning how to bring this self-compassion to myself in order to very deeply listen so that I can process and grow and heal. So today I want to just talk about listening in general and how it's something that we need both with and to and from others, but also within to and from ourselves. So things like mindfulness practices, for me personally, I have found great benefit in meditation and in things like yoga, in body scans, in Qigong, different things that I have found help me to slow down and get out of my mind and into my body, into the felt sense of my body, so that I can start to sift through the noise. It also, of course, with practice, helps to focus your attention and your concentration, which we all desperately need in the modern day world that we're living in. We really are bombarded, and just the stuff, the apps and the social media and the life that we're living, I've heard it referred to as the attention economy. You know, all of these mega corporations are mining and selling and buying our data so that they can literally hold and control our attention to make more money for themselves, right? They're also trying to sell us on various optimization products or life hacks. Instagram is full of all of these in the wellness space and without, various people and products and services and plans and things that you just need to do their way or buy, and life will be great and everything will be perfect and you will be healthy, well, and at peace. And I think anyone that has spent any amount of time, effort, or even money on any of those things realizes rather quickly that that's not necessarily the case. And so this is why it's a conflicted thing for me, because, you know, I'm not trying to sell you anything other than the idea I want to sell you on yourself. I want to give you and yourself and your intentions and who you are and who you want to be. I want to give that back to you. I really am hoping to create the spaces and the opportunity for people to engage in compassionate listening for themselves, to bring about that healing for themselves, to bring about the kind of growth and contentment and inner peace that comes with becoming the kind of person that we want to be. It's not easy. There is no magic snake oil. There are no quick fixes. It does take time and effort and intentionality and creating even the space to work with, say, a therapist or a coach once a week for an hour, right? We need to give ourselves at least that. We need to provide the opportunity to start to build the awareness and the presence and the possibilities for compassionate listening. So when I think about my own journey and my own path, and as I continue to go down it, but it's almost like around and around it, right? As I continue to spiral around and up the layers or down, whichever direction you want to go in, I just am continuously floored by how much more is there. And I've shared and spoken about my journey freely many other places, but I started from such a dark, despairing place, and hitting my kind of bottom is what propelled me forward and had me reaching out for help and taking my first steps. And I'm forever grateful that I did, and that I did get propelled down this path. But, you know, I needed to start with quitting drinking. I needed to afford myself the opportunity to just get to like a kind of baseline of standard care almost, right? I needed to get there first before I could even begin to explore mindfulness or meditate or even, yoga and things like that. It has been and continues to be a long, slow journey. And that patience and the time that it takes to be with the unfolding of that journey is also something I think that is definitely not valued or emphasized or acknowledged even in our modern day fast-paced culture. Patience as a virtue may still exist, but it's something that most of us don't feel like we have time for. It's something that I personally am working with and working on is patience, not only for other people and situations in my life, but most importantly, for me and my processing and my journeying. When I do look back on my old journals, on my weekly self-coaching worksheets, even on my notebooks and things like that, my gratitudes, my daily gratitude practice, so much of it focuses on my productivity or what I got accomplished. And on the one hand, that's great. It's great to feel proud. And if I'm writing what I'm grateful for the day, anything is fair game. I'm not going to judge the content that I am noting down for myself. But I am very, very much aware of how much is like, I ticked off all of these boxes on my to-do list, or I was able to get something accomplished on my website or on my podcast, or I signed this new client, or I made this new program. I'm just very aware of that if I'm not moving forward, if I don't feel like I am taking these kind of big steps or leaps forward in a timely enough fashion, I do start to kind of fall into negative thinking or worrying or ruminating in my mind. And if I can catch myself in that entire kind of journey, it helps to really validate and reinforce how important it really is to practice presence and simply being and sitting with my experience. So that is why I do meditate, and that is why I do retreats by myself at home, because that is what I am able to do in my current life circumstance and situation. So that patience for our unfolding and for our journeying and for it taking as long as it's going to take is something that's really difficult for a lot of us to accept. And it's a way that I think a lot of us sometimes give up rather easily on whatever it is, if it's a diet or if it's an exercise program, if it's a New Year's resolution or a goal. It's hard to accept that it's going to take time. And again, this is why I am so committed to doing what I'm doing, because we need help to remind ourselves that even small steps are still steps. Even 1% progress is greater than 0. So sometimes we need that person that can hold up the mirror to ourselves to show us what we are actually doing, or even what we are actually capable of, what we want to do or become. It gets us back to that compassionate listening. Even when we know we don't feel very good or we don't like the way that our life is going necessarily, we as humans, it's not just you, we judge ourselves and we criticize ourselves, and we can think of maybe all of the reasons why we are failing or why we're not doing what we want to be doing. And that just immediately stops us. It stops the process, right? It prevents the creative, open learning centers of our brain. Once we get stuck into negative self-talk or rumination or shame, it literally shuts down the learning centers in our brains. So how are we going to be able to compassionately listen to what our truest intentions or values are, which lead to the kind of life we want to live, the kind of person that we want to be? We need help both to and from others to be able to learn that about ourselves. And we might need practices or strategies or skills to learn to combat that negative self-talk or rumination or judging critical thoughts. As I mentioned before, there are various mindfulness practices that I have found so valuable in my own life because they get me out of my mind and into my body, and they help me to see what is happening up here all the time. And our minds, they run the show. They do need to run the show a lot of the time. But when they take over everything all the time is when we get stuck. We get stuck into the same habits of thinking or patterns, and we don't see any of the possibilities or any of the new ways of thinking or being that might serve us better. So, referring again on my own journey and reflecting at one of my bleakest points, I did reach out and find a therapist, and I had a handful of sessions. And I am not dissing therapy at all. It is very, very important and vital and so beneficial for those that have the means and the access to it. But what I found in my particular case was that I was so subsumed in the stories and the narrative of what I was going through and what I felt like was happening to me. And I was talking about it. Luckily, I had my best friend. I had my sister at the time. I had places to talk and vent. I was also journaling. And it was just replaying in my mind so much, like constantly. I was so miserable and so unhappy because all I could think about was the pain and the suffering and the hurt and the injustice and the unfairness. And just my misery was like constantly at the forefront of my mind, or at least that's how it felt at the time. So when I was able to get to therapy and start to talk to someone, I didn't want to talk more about it. I think I was so sick of thinking and talking about it that I really needed to find ways to process that suffering and that grief and that pain in other ways. And that is what I eventually did find. Talk therapy is very, very important and valuable and vital. And please do not think that I am saying anything negative about it. But for me at that particular time, if I had unlimited funds, then yes, perhaps getting into therapy and staying there for like years and decades will be so valuable one day if that ever can happen. But it hasn't been an option up until now. And it really wasn't even an option then. And I realized I needed to get out of the story and out of the narrative, and I needed to find other ways to be and to live. And that is what I eventually did. But again, it was a very long process, and it had to unfold and I had to journey the way that it did. I think it really needed to come in an organic way. I wish that I had known about coaching even at that time. I wish that I had found supports that could have helped me and kind of held my hand as I found the steps that I needed to take myself. But I honestly just wasn't even aware what was out there. And when I was in the tunnel vision of my grief and my pain and my anger and my rage, I didn't have the mental capacity or the wherewithal to be looking for resources. I just needed to survive and get through each day. So again, this is why I do what I do. And as my path has unfolded, and I found those practices when I was at my kind of worst, I couldn't think my way into a better way of living. I was maxed out and stuck in the story. But when I found ways to stop drinking so much, when I found the way to stop smoking, when I found the way to start meditating and exploring things like yoga and running, like as I engaged in the practices, they opened up the door and the space and the possibility to distance me from the thinking that was kind of the problem. And then that opened up enough space that things could kind of like shift and move and settle and then emerge anew with a lot of time and effort and energy. So I think that it's another way that we can compassionately listen to ourselves by exploring different somatic bodily practices, by exploring mindfulness and giving ourselves the opportunity to slow down and notice and hear what's really going on deep inside of us. The only way out is through. And the only way through whatever difficulty or problem or circumstance that we find ourselves in is by being really honest and open with ourselves about how it's making us feel and what we're actually experiencing. I can share another personal reflection and insight that again comes over and over again in kind of deeper and deeper ways or maybe layers of intensity. But as I have explored self-compassion as a practice and as a strategy, and as a brief refresher course, self-compassion is composed of 3 things. So it's mindfulness, just simply being aware of what is happening, what your experience is, self-kindness as opposed to self-judgment. So offering yourself the same kind of kindness that you would give to a friend going through a similar thing, and common humanity, remembering that it is not only part of the human condition to suffer, but that we all do, that everybody goes through these difficulties and that we're not isolated and alone. But so as I have studied and practiced and explored that, the thing that keeps kind of blowing me away again and again is the mindfulness piece, that I have dealt with difficult situations in my life in the past by doing everything I could to push it away and negate it and distract it or numb it. And when I have then later looked back on, say, the really painful, difficult experience of losing my second baby. I listened to the podcast episode I was on talking about that experience a year after I recorded it. And I just cried through the entire thing, but my heart was breaking open over and over and over again. There was so much more compassion that I could listen to that story and hear it almost as another person. And so I was able to just really be honest and open up to how painful and difficult it was. At the time, I think my body and my mind and myself was in survival mode. And part of that meant keeping out some of the most intense emotions, just literally trying to save myself and find a way through it the best I knew how. Our stress response and our amygdala and all of our biochemistry and biophysical processes are very well attuned to do whatever they think they need to do to keep us safe. And so there's a lot that goes in to each and every one of us, our individual processes, right, of dealing with stress and difficult things. But it's the mindfulness that I keep being almost surprised by, that it's really hard for me to acknowledge how painful things are when they're happening. And so if I can continue to learn to open my heart, learn to be compassionate towards myself when I am experiencing these difficult things that will come again, unfortunately, that is life, the easier it will be to navigate them and process them and deal with them in the future. And the more I am able to process and grow and heal from the things that have come in the past. So it's all this process of compassionate listening, bringing healing that we can do for ourselves. It's really, really important. You know, if I had a magic wand and I could sprinkle the fairy dust of self-awareness and self-compassion and kindness over everyone in the world, I would. I think that would be my one wish and my one desire, because if all of us had the compassion and the kindness and the awareness for our own experience and our own lives, we would naturally give that to others as well. Compassion is not a one-way street. We don't generate it for ourselves and then keep it within. We naturally give it to others. And it works both ways. When we are giving it to others, when we begin to understand that we are also part of the human family of living beings and the interconnected relationship with everything on our planet and in the universe, really, we realize that we also are as deserving of the compassion and kindness and care that we might more easily give to others. It's a intertwined two-way street of lots of compassion, love, and goodness. So I think I have gone off long enough for today. I'm not sure if I said everything that I wanted to say, but I am going to trust that enough came out. I'm going to trust, as I continue to do this year, every day, every moment, that things are unfolding the way they're meant to. I can rest assured that I am on my path and I am doing the things that I am meant to do in the world. And it is my true pleasure and joy to help others figure out what that is for them as well. So for today's takeaway, I have 3 questions for you. These can be just general self-reflection questions. These can be useful if you're facing a challenge or a decision that you need to make. I heard them shared on another podcast thinking about uncertainty, but I think they're really great and they're really useful. And so they are my gift for you today, today's takeaway to do on your own if you would like. The first question is, what do I want to do, right? So what do I want or what do I want to do? The second is, do I want that? Do I want to do that? So if you think about something like smoking, right? What do I want? Well, I might want to smoke a cigarette, but do I want to do that? Might be a different answer. So what do I want to do? Do I want to do that? And what does those two answers tell me about who I am or who I want to be? So when I was battling quitting smoking for the very last time, the answers to those questions probably would have been, like, what do I want? Yeah, I really want to smoke a cigarette because I am feeling nicotine withdrawal. But do I want to do that? No, I want to learn a way to finally quit. I want to learn a way to not be chained to this disgusting, expensive habit. And so what do those two answers tell me about who I am or who I want to become? If I'm on the road to becoming a non-smoker, then I need to find the way to refrain from the thing that I want, from the desire I have in this moment, right? So that's my takeaway for today. If anything in this discussion sparked your interest or curiosity, or you are keen to learn more about how you can learn how to listen to yourself or practice self-compassion or any of the things that I talked about, I am accepting one-to-one clients. I am also running my Nourish program at the end of this month in July. So I'll throw the links to that in the show notes. Feel free to reach out over DMs or email as well. I always love to hear from listeners. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for being here. Until next time, take care.